Hey ladies, so I posted a survey yesterday about what is preventing you, what's standing in the way from you getting what you want in your relationship. And thank you to Aubrey, I think who it was, who added another category, saying that you feel like you are doing 90% of the work and your partner is not doing their share of the work. And that's super typical. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that one and forgiveness. And if any of you have questions and you want to post them in here while I'm doing this live, I'm happy to field those for you because I want this to be interactive. It's really important to me that you get to have your questions answered when I do these lives, which I try to do about once a week or so. Because there are a lot of things that we try in relationship that don't work. And as long as you keep doing the things that don't work, or as long as you're functioning from a paradigm that's faulty or flawed, you're going to keep getting the same results. I hope that makes sense. So feel free, if you're watching this, to post comments, and I'll keep my eye on the feed so that I can answer your questions along the way. All right, so if you feel like you're someone who's doing 90% of the work, that's really typical. And here's the thing, is if you feel like you're doing 90% of the work all of the time, probably whatever the work is that you're doing is not working because you don't feel like you're getting anywhere. And, I don't know what version of work some of you are engaging in, and again, feel free to post in the comments so that we can have interaction around this. But I can tell you what I tend to hear from my 10 plus years of sitting with couples and my 20 years working with families and individuals in counseling and therapy. So I've heard it all, maybe, or pretty close to it all at this point. Often, one of the foundational problems is that what people are focusing on is communication. And if the work that you're doing is focusing on communication, or if the work that you're doing is reading books and reading blogs, there are several reasons why that's not working. Number one, I'll see if I can keep all my numbers straight and go through this. If you're functioning on communication does not matter if you're standing in a less evolved version of yourself, which could also be called a less mature part of yourself. It's what I call the 1.0 version of you. And so all of us show up in marriage in our 1.0 self. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like if you have a child, they show up as an infant. And that's how it goes. And then they learn and grow and crawl and walk and learn to have speech and go to preschool. And, there are all these developmental milestones that they hit. And there's nothing wrong with any of them. And some of them are a little more challenging than others, right? So similarly, when we come together in relationship, I show up as my 1.0 self. It's the part of me that I'm showing up in that will require growth, right? So I'm my 1.0 self, and my partner is their 1.0 selves. And that's beautiful and fine. And it's actually how it goes. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? This is just how it is, because none of us, or most of us, did not take a class on how to do relationship, how to do intimacy, how to do communication, how to build a healthy marital container, how to ask for what we want, how to receive pleasure, how to experience joy, how to love ourselves enough to set a boundary. Are you picking up what I'm laying down here, right? So there are so many things that we don't know and we haven't learned. And so we show up in our 1.0 version of ourselves at 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is that we say I do, or move in together or have a child together, any of those three things. And what happens is that our partner starts mirroring who we are. Like, now I just married a mirror. And I have to see these parts of myself where I'm not very good at setting a boundary. Let's talk about that, because we've been talking about this a lot in my mentoring groups and in some of the private work I've been doing with women this week. We've been talking about containers, which are boundaries. So I'm going to pause right here for some of you. What I'm talking about here is not for everyone, okay? Which is totally fine. You're going to see me in this space more and more, just kind of speaking to a reasonably sophisticated audience, okay? Because there are so many group spaces out there that will talk to you about like lowering your tone of voice and like communication tips. And if that is what you're looking for, you can go to those spaces and do that, and that's amazing and wonderful for you. In this space, I want to invite you to have a deeper, more rigorous, more honest conversation about your personal growth and who it is that you choose to practice being every single day creates the container of your relationship. It doesn't mean that if you're in a terrible place and it's like crappy and you hate your marriage or your partner, doesn't mean that you married the wrong person, okay? And it doesn't mean that you suck at being married. It means that you've been practicing a whole lot of things for a really long time that have produced the outcome of this person in this relationship, right? And in order to see real change with that, it requires us to do our own growth work. And I know the term like personal development is a little like, right? So I get that. So I'm sorry, right? And it's just how it is that our relationships, and this is why I talk about your relationship being your ashram, because it is your growth curriculum and it's right in front of you. It's right in front of you, which is amazing. And so if you're someone of the 20 or however many women who said you feel like you're doing 90% of the work, probably why it is that you're not getting the change that you want is that you're doing that work from your 1.0 identity. And as long as you do that, it's a tool. And the reason why I don't teach tools in here is that a tool, like a script on how you talk about your feelings and, you know, I feel this when you that. I mean, that's fine. That's okay. But if I'm standing in an identity that includes scarcity, I'm not enoughness, contempt for my partner, secrecy that I've been holding on to an affair that I had, unforgiveness because of the affair that he had, all kinds of things, right? Active codependence, which looks like me not showing up as who I want to be or speaking myself into powerful and meaningful existence into my marriage, because if I do, he's going to get pissed off. And so I'm just not going to, and to be quiet because you don't understand, Jenny, if I can't say those things to him, right? And I do understand that you have created or chosen a container that you continue to practice living in and being in, where you, okay, hang in here with me, ladies, where you feel like you're a victim to the situation or the circumstance. And please hear me that I say that with all the love and compassion in my heart. I know this. This is typical and normal. Normal in that it's typical. Not normal that it's healthy, but it's just like how it goes. And it's fine. And it's no big deal. And if you're hearing me say these things, and if you're feeling this like, I hate this lady, right? You're welcome to leave this space. Or you can listen to that. If you feel like that agitation is coming up because there's some truth there, you can take a breath and maybe be brave and courageous enough to listen. Like, oh, there might be something here. Where is it that I'm practicing showing up in a way that is keeping me small? And I don't mean keeping me small like I'm better than my partner, so I need to leave. I mean keeping me small, that I'm not actually showing up with mature vulnerability, right? Mature vulnerability is not a demand. Mature vulnerability is a boundary, it's a container, it's a fence, it's a request, and it's standing with our knowing, right? And it's not martyrdom. And when I have a martyr identity, which many of us do, and I will raise my hand because I spent the first 10 years of my 20-year marriage in martyrdomville, 100%, where I felt like I was doing everything and he wasn't doing anything. Let me tell you about all the things that I did. Da, da. You can hear in my voice, and I know I'm dramatizing this a little bit, but in that space, no tool is going to work. You know why? Because I'm right and he's wrong. And so it's this funny, crazy place that we put ourselves in, where I'm like kind of better than him because I'm going to therapy and I'm going to yoga and I'm listening to podcasts and I'm reading the books and I'm doing all the things. So I'm sort of better than my partner, him or her, or they. Great, right? But then at the same time, I'm a victim to the situation. So I toggle back and forth between both. Is this making sense to you? And in that place, I'm going to come out, and I hear it all the time where women say, why do I have to be the one to do all the work? You don't. Don't do the work. I don't care. Don't. Like, whatever. It's kind of like, why do I have to be the one to eat healthy? Why do I have to be the one to exercise and take care of my body? You don't. You can do something else. Right? But that part, and again, I know it. I live there. It's why I do what I do. And it's why I'm good at it, because I've done it and I lived there. And then I went to school for it and learned how to show up differently and have been humbled in it. And I know it's not easy. So all of these things that I'm saying, I know that this is not easy to do just because it sounds simple. Like, oh, you just need to have a different identity and not live in the martyrdom identity. You know, that's not like an easy thing. We hold on to it. Let me tell you why I'm mad. You want to know what he did? Yeah, sure. You could totally tell me what he did. Right? And then there's some forgiveness work to be done there, or there's some boundaries to set. But there's definitely some showing up to do. And there's certainly some rigorous and vigorous practice of your own self-love. I have to love myself enough to set a healthy boundary, to create a container of a marriage or relationship where I get to grow and evolve myself. So I might actually have the good opportunity to receive the love and the connection that I say that I want. It was so interesting. In one of my graduate spaces yesterday, we had such an amazing call because these women just courageous gladiator women, incredible. And we were talking about the tenderness and the vulnerability that comes from recognizing that we get to a place in our life where we actually have to decide to take full responsibility for our lives. Like, if I'm going to really honestly take full responsibility for what's going on in my life, that I haven't had sex for years, that I feel so lonely, that I feel so disconnected, that I've had 3 affairs, that my partner's had 2 affairs, that I feel like I'm not being the model to my kids. I'm a great mother, but I'm not showing my kids how to have healthy conflict. I'm not setting them up to have the kind of marriage that I'd want them to have. Right? When we take an honest look at that, and then when we're willing to be self-reflective, and again, that's not everyone. And if that's not you, it's completely fine. I'm not here to convince you of that. I'm here to speak to the women who are like, oh yeah, I kind of know that I need to take accountability for pieces of me and grow those pieces. I don't even want to say grow them up, but it's like up leveling your software. It's why I talk about like this 1.0 and this 2.0. I know it really reduces it to something simple, But I do that because our 1.0 identity, my 1.0 identity, was filled with contempt, being a martyr, being righteous, rolling my eyes a lot, holding my husband at an arm's length, being impatient, thinking about how I do everything. And I did, because I was a therapist and I went to school and I read all the books and I did all the things and I went to all the retreats, right? So I literally did do everything. And thinking all the things, I shouldn't be with this person, why did I marry this guy, right? That's an identity. It's a codified identity. There are thoughts, there are feelings, there are behaviors, and they ping off of each other. And there's the martyrdom, and there's the how come I have to, and why doesn't he, right? And then we sit with our girlfriends, and we have wine, and we talk about why they didn't, blah, blah, blah. And that's an identity. And it's a powerful one. And most people will spend their lives there. And that's fine, right? Statistically, like 9 out of 10 people will stay there. It's fine, whatever. You get through it, you numb out, you overshop, you tolerate, you deal with however it is. You get divorced, you do it again, it's fine. Some people, right, decide, like, I don't want to keep being this way. And I recognize that I'm a part of it. Not all of it, because your partner has. I know they are messy and human and have all their things, right? But that I recognize that I've been practicing criticism. Even when I'm like, well, I tried that communication tool. Well, I read that book. That's fantastic. But the change happens when you show up and you practice embodying a new identity day after day after day. Have you ever known anybody who's getting sober? That's an embodied practice. They choose sobriety every single day, which means they're choosing water or gum or going for a run or hang out with new friends. They have a whole new series of thoughts and feelings that they're telling themselves. They have a sponsor that they talk to. They have a new community that's supporting them, right? It is a different identity. You get that? Because they have to become sober from the addictive patterning that's over here in their 1.0. And some of us have to become sober from our addictive patterning that's over here, right? Which means we have to start hanging out with different people in our head, right? Because if you're hanging out with the lady in your head that's complaining about your partner, if you're hanging out with the lady in your head that's like, why did you marry that guy? He's kind of a loser. If you're hanging out with the lady in your head that has an inability to see anything positive that's happening. Hi, Ingrid. Nice to see you here. If you're hanging out with her, what identity is that? Over here. Right? And so, again, I'm speaking to those of you who said you feel like you're doing 90% of the work. I get that. I absolutely hear that. And so pulling back kind of what's happening in there, because you're either, whatever you're doing isn't working if it's not moving you forward, which I'm assuming it's not moving you forward, which is why you responded to the poem that way. So then stop doing whatever it is you're doing, because that's not working, right? And then look at, am I still standing in the old identity? Most of us are. Most of us are. Because doing that shift requires us to get outside of our system to be able to see the patterning. Again, I'm talking to a sophisticated woman here, so if you're hanging in with me, bravo you. As long as I believe that I'm this identity, like as long as I am in here and I believe that I'm in here, then all I will do in my life is just react, right, to what's happening around me. As soon as I develop, it's called self-awareness. Self-awareness comes before accountability. And self-awareness means I can step outside of this identity and say, yes, I recognize that I wake up in the morning and I see the laundry on the floor and I immediately think, why the heck can he not put it in the hamper? And then my emotion is contempt and annoyance. And then my body is like, ugh, and that starts my day. When I can have the awareness to see that I'm doing that, you have the most amazing thing, which is you have the opportunity to be accountable and to choose something different. Okay? To choose something different. And it's not just that easy to choose something different, because then you have to know, what do I want to choose? This goes back to being responsible enough to create the kind of life that you want. I don't know what I want to choose. I had a woman tell me that yesterday. I don't know, and I feel super responsible because I'm just so used to doing what's happening around me. I'm so used to like doing for the kids and doing for the partner and doing for everybody else. Like, I don't even know what I want anymore, right? When I don't know what I want, I'm going to go back to what's known, which is this 1.0 identity, right? So if you feel like you're doing 90% of the work, you probably are. And so the work that you're doing is not functional to get you a change. So do something else. Probably if you feel like you're doing 90% of the work, my guess is you're super tangled up in resentment. And if you're super tangled up in resentment, it means that you have not successfully figured out, and this is a process, it's not a destination, okay, how to craft a relationship of a marriage that meets your desires, your preferences, your wants, to talk about that explicitly with your partner, and then to create it with your thoughts, feelings, and your actions, and to have boundaries around it. And it's just such a travesty, honestly, that we don't treat marriage a little bit more like we treat retirement or business or our kids' college funds or, you know, my goodness, what we decide to dress our pet up as for Halloween. Like, there's more thought in so many other things, right? If you want what I think of as a 2.0 marriage, if you want a relationship that's loving, that's kind, where there's empathy, where there's passion, where there's connection, where there's mutuality, if you want that, amazing. So you then become the person that's practicing being that. And what most people think is, I can't have that here in my 1.0 identity. I have to go find somebody else, right? Or this dude that I'm connected to needs to change so that I can get that. And that's just not how it is, right? You don't leave this thing to get that. You become that first, which is not the answer you want to hear. But it's the truth. It's the truth. So if you feel like you're doing so much of the work, stop doing what you're doing if it's not moving the dial forward. That's number one. Number two, don't bother using communication tools if you're standing in toxic resentment, because what will happen is you'll probably like use the tool. Your partner will do his or her 1.0 thing, and then you'll be like, ugh, why do I even freaking bother? Right? Or you'll leave the book on their nightstand and they don't read it, and then you're like even more annoyed, right? And so stop working on your marriage, right? Look at yourself. Doesn't mean work on yourself. It's not work in my philosophy. It's a get to. You have life. You're breathing. You get to grow. Awesome. Doesn't mean I always like it. It's not always the answer I want. Sometimes it totally sucks and it's super hard. It's like being a parent. Those of you who are parenting don't always like it. Not fun a lot of the time, right? And you learn a lot and you just keep showing up, right? And you do it in order to gain mastery. Not for your partner, for you. And as you gain mastery for you, here's the great outcome. You become the version of you that's more loving and kind and empathetic and forgiving. And it may be that you practice and you practice and you practice, and you're this 2.0 up-level version of you, and your partner isn't, which is fine. They're doing their thing, which is fine. And then you get to, with love and kindness in your heart and being, say, wow, we are complete, because who I am is not a fit, and it's fine, right? But that means that there needs to be maturity enough to have self-awareness, to be accountable radically, and then to make a decision. It is a scary thing as a grown-up to make a decision about your life in a big way, which is why we pause around things like divorce. Because it's like, oh, that feels so final. Yeah. And we should take it with a pause, right? The thing that's just so sad to me is that we don't, myself included, we spend zero time contracting around what our marriage is going to look like. We say vows and then put them away or hang them on the wall and then never revisit them. Never. And then we wonder why our relationships fall short. And it's like, duh. It's like, I want to have $5 million and now I'm not going to do anything to make that happen. And then I'm pissed off and wondering why I don't have $5 million. Well, because having $5 million means that I'm going to have to do something and have a job and save and not buy Starbucks, pumpkin latte. Like I'm going to have to make some choices that might be uncomfortable and recommit to myself over and over and over again. Right? Is this making sense to you all? And I hope that you hear, this is the good news. It's not a mystery. It is not a mystery. If you're doing 90% of the work that you're doing isn't working. Stop working on your marriage. Just stop. Which doesn't mean F you to your partner. It means come back home to you and look at what are the 3 ways that I make it difficult for my partner to do whatever it is I want him to do. Here are the things I hear. The top things I hear is I want my partner to listen to me. I want them to communicate more, be more open. I want them to notice what I'm doing. So then you ask yourself, how do I make it hard? I sat for thousands of hours in an office with couples where one person would say, I want my partner to listen to me. And then would go on to do a lot of things to make it really hard for the partner to listen. Criticize, raise their voice, name call, right? Have contempt for. And again, I'm not saying that we're not hurt, ladies. We're hurting. And I'm sure that your partner has done a lot of things that have been really painful. 1,000%. If somebody's going to hurt you, it's probably going to be your spouse, and you're going to do the same to them. It's just the nature of marriage, right? It doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just how we learn and grow, right? And so not having the practice of how to repair, how to forgive, how to have compassion and curiosity. But those things don't come in your 1.0 container because there's so much hurt and unforgiveness there, right? And it's a scary place to walk away from that into growing into the person that you want to be and the marriage that you want to experience. But it's possible. It's not for everybody. It's not. Just eating vegan is not for everybody. I don't eat vegan, though maybe I should. But it's not for everybody. It's fine. Right? But for, the women who I work with, I have so much love and respect for them because they're willing to turn the mirror back to themselves and look at themselves and say, I'm going to do 100% of my growth. I'm going to take 100% accountability for my life. And I'm going to set boundaries, build a container, practice rigorous self-love and compassion. And I'm going to do that day after day after day. And you know what happens? They become somebody else. They become somebody else. And when they're in this new space, the world looks a little bit different and their partner looks a little bit different. And sometimes they're softer to their partner and they start learning how to set down walls so that they can actually receive the love that their partner might actually already have for them. It might already be there. For some women, and this might be you, that it's not so much about setting down walls because their partner is not kind and is mean or abusive, right? And if that's the case, then, oh, that wall is there to keep me safe, which means I've gotten into a relationship with somebody and I need to set a big boundary that's a healthy boundary to say I'm complete here in some ways, right? And so the reason why in this space I don't talk about saving your marriage, somebody just emailed me too, and another clinician, and she said, something about saving marriages. And I said, I don't talk about saving marriages. That's not what I do. I don't know if you should stay married or not. That's your business. It's not mine. I know that when a woman shows up with me and they've been practicing resentment and contempt and anger and unforgiveness and loneliness and hurt for 1, 2, 3, usually it's about 5 to 10, 15, 20 years. I know that practice is what needs to change because we become what we practice, right? So if you're practicing martyrdom, if you're practicing victimhood, if you're practicing why do I have to, right? No tool in the world is going to work there. No communication book is going to work there. The other reason why so many books and things, you can read it and it's like, amazing, this sounds great. But we don't learn by thinking about it. We learn by doing it, by speaking the words grounded in a different energy. A different energy is a different identity. Because I can say the words, but if my feet are planted in contempt, it doesn't matter, right? So I hope that this is helpful for you, for those of you who said that you feel like you're the one doing all of the work. And if you have a hard time forgiving, again, because that was the second highest winner of the survey, forgiveness work is a thing. And there's identity in it. Who do I need to be to forgive? I mean, these are the things that I teach women who I work with, right? We have to start asking ourselves powerful questions. If we don't ask powerful questions, they say that your life is simply an outcome of the questions that you're asking yourself. So if I ask myself questions like, why did I marry this loser? When can I leave? How come it's so hard? All those questions lead back to over here, right? If I ask myself questions like, who do I need to be to set down my pain? Oh, that's an up-leveled question. What do I need to believe in order to forgive? Oh, what do I need to forgive in myself in order to have the heart space to forgive my partner? Right? There are all kinds of questions that shift you into a different state. But if you don't know how to do that, right, you get stuck in holding on, gripping on to the familiar. And pain is a familiar binky. Suffering, I should say, is the familiar binky that many of us hold on to. Pain is part of being human. Learning how to feel the pain, feel it, we get to feel it, we get to not like it, we get to tantrum around it, we get to, right? We get to, all of us have pain and discomfort. Suffering is a choice. Suffering is a choice. What do I get out of choosing to suffer for years or decades? Ooh. Right? So I hope this is helpful. In order to get the kind of transformation to go from one state of being in the world to another, what I suggest is having a container that will take you there, having a map, having a plan, having a community, having mentorship, and having somebody to guide you who's done it on their own and who is more interested in your growth than them being your friend. One of the women who I mentored today, she said, "You scare me." And she's getting her result, right? And sometimes it's scary to see the truth. My mentors and friends who are closest to me say things that I don't always want to hear, but I know it's what I need to hear and see in order to move me forward, right? And that's love. When somebody's willing to say the thing that you don't want to say. And the truth is that if you're stuck in this, you're not looking at something that you have to see in order to shift. So you need somebody outside of you who can do that. So if any of this is speaking to you, if you've made it to 30 minutes in or however long this is, and you're interested in what I do, feel free to DM me and I can send you some information about that. I hope you're well. I'm so delighted that you're here. I'm delighted that you've hung in through this and that you are the kind of woman who's willing to take, or at least consider taking, radical accountability in your life. Bravo, you. Well done. Have a beautiful evening, and I will look forward to talking to you again soon.